Tonight on Reporting Scotland, the teenage driver jailed for killing his 3 friends in a high-speed crash. After seeing Jake Loy get his sentence, the family of one of the boys killed say their lives have been ripped apart.
It's not one family, there's us 3 family, then there's a wider family, then there's the friends, there's hundreds of people's lives that boy's ruined.
A Scottish Government minister apologises over his meeting with an Israeli diplomat after the talks prompted a furious reaction within his party. Also on tonight's programme, the workers who say they were treated like slaves on Scottish fishing boats.
It was a nightmare.
We're short of water, we're short of food.
They just want work, work, work.
He doesn't see me as a person. He doesn't care about my life.
We are slaves.
A BBC investigation reveals 35 men employed by a Dumfriesshire firm were recognised as victims of modern slavery by the Home Office.
And coming up in the sports, St Johnstone demand answers from the Scottish FA after a controversial goal in their League Cup defeat to Rangers.
Hello, I'm Laura Miller. Welcome to Monday's programme. Three young people dead: Ian Cannon, Finlay Jones, Tyler Johnson, and many more lives devastated. Today, the teenage driver responsible for killing his friends in a horror crash was jailed for more than 4.5 years. Jake Loy was 17 at the time and didn't have a full licence when he crashed into another vehicle near Dumfries in March 2022. After the sentencing, the brother of one of the victims said his family had been ripped to pieces. Katrina Renton was in court.
Today, a large group of family and friends of the boys who died came to court to see Jake Loy sentenced. He pleaded guilty earlier this year to causing death and serious injury by dangerous driving. 16-year-olds Ian Cannon, Finlay Jones and Tyler Johnson, all from Moffat, died in the crash. Finlay's family paid tribute to him outside court.
He was a lovely, lovely boy. He was easily led. He was a young boy. He had his whole life in front of him. He was going to college.
I loved him so much, and the 3 boys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
19-year-old Jake Loy, who was 17 at the time, was driving. He hadn't passed his test and only had a provisional licence. He crashed head-on with another vehicle on the A711 at Cargan Bridge. The court learned the black Honda Civic Jake Loy was driving was his own car, but he'd never driven it on a public road before. It was dark, and the other driver said he could see no lights on the teenager's car, and it went straight into the front of his vehicle. Loy's car was split in 2. The 3 boys died at the scene. The 3 people in the other car were seriously injured, as was Jake Loy.
The court heard the boys were members of a Snapchat group. The morning after the crash, one of the group saw a message that had been written by Ian Cannon while he was in the car being driven by Jake Loy. He said that he was scared because Jake Loy was swerving all over the place and that he was a terrible driver and he was floating it. Sentencing, Lord Harrower said the message indicated that Jake Loy's driving formed part of a more prolonged and deliberate course of bad or aggressive driving with disregard for the danger being caused to others, and sentenced him to 4 years and 8 months in prison and disqualified him from driving for 8 years.
No sentence could ever be enough. He's took away our brother. He's ruined our family. He's ripped our family to pieces every day.
It's not one family, there's us 3 family, then there's a wider family, then there's the friends. There's hundreds of people's lives that boy's ruined.
In mitigation, Jake Loy's lawyer, Donald Finlay Casey, said Loy told him if he could take the boy's place, he would. He would rather it had been him. The judge said no sentence could alleviate the anguish of family members and those injured. So many lives shattered, all from the events of one night. Katrina Renton, reporting Scotland at the High Court in Glasgow.
The Scottish Government has announced it will not hold any more meetings with Israeli ambassadors until what it called real progress is made in peace talks over the Gaza conflict. The SNP administration has faced criticism, including from within the party, after the External Affairs Secretary, Angus Robertson, met Israel's Deputy Ambassador to the UK. Mr Robertson said he was sorry the meeting was not strictly limited to talks about a ceasefire. Our chief political correspondent, Lindsay Bewes, has more.
It's the photograph that sparked upset and anger. The External Affairs Secretary Angus Robertson faced criticism from within his own party and beyond for meeting with Israel's Deputy Ambassador to the UK earlier this month. Today he said there'd be no further encounters, but it was right he made the Scottish Government's views on Gaza clear.
Well, I think it's important that Israel hears international opposition to what it's doing in Gaza, so I have absolutely no regrets about saying what I had to say on behalf of the Scottish Government in opposition to what is happening in Gaza at the present time, in support of a ceasefire, in support of humanitarian support being allowed in full to Gaza. I don't regret that. What I am very sorry about is an impression that this has created of a normalisation of relations between the Scottish Government and Israel. It is not, and it will not.
The strength of feeling on Gaza within the SNP has been demonstrated by the suspension of one of its own MSPs. John Mason is facing punishment for social media remarks in which he said Israel had not committed genocide.
There's no suggestion from Israel that they want to destroy the Palestinians or the people of Gaza. Whereas we should remember, Iran and Hamas have said they want Israel wiped off the map.
It's not just the SNP who feels strongly on this issue. Greens co-leader Patrick Harvie today lodged a parliamentary motion calling on Mr Robertson to apologise.
I want to see changes to Scottish Government practice as a result of this, not just the justified embarrassment that the Scottish Government have now acknowledged about a meeting that shouldn't have taken place.
The SNP will hope today's intervention will bring an end to this row at a time when the First Minister's biggest challenge is uniting his party.
Well, Lindsay's at Holyrood Forest tonight. OK, Lindsay, does this put an end to the controversy then?
Well, Laura, the government will certainly hope so. These comments by Angus Robertson today designed, I think, to get on the front foot as far as this story was concerned, because it was not going away. The internal backlash within the SNP was growing, both publicly and privately. Both anger at this meeting taking place at all, but also by the impression created that there could be cooperation between the Scottish and Israeli governments. The Deputy Ambassador tweeting afterwards to say she looked forward to cooperation on areas like technology, culture and renewable energy. And those comments from John Mason and his own meeting with the Deputy Ambassador only served to heighten this row over the course of the weekend. Now, the SNP is holding its conference at the end of this month, and there had already been early moves to put pressure on Angus Robertson and his position in government. Now Angus Robertson and indeed the First Minister and the rest of the Scottish Government will be hoping that they can focus at that conference on the issues that unite the SNP rather than issues.
OK, Lindsay at Holyrood. The sound appears to have dropped out, but I think we've got the gist of what you were saying. Thank you. Dozens of foreign workers may have been trafficked to work for a small Scottish fishing company, a BBC investigation has revealed. 35 men were recognised as victims of modern slavery by the Home Office over an 8-year period. They were employed by TN Trawlers and its sister companies based in Annan in Dumfriesshire. The company has denied allegations of modern slavery and said its workers were well treated. Our social affairs correspondent Chris Clements reports.
My name is Vishal and last name is Sharma. Vishal Sharma, I'm from India.
Vishal was an experienced seafarer when he arrived in London in 2017. He expected to work in the engine room of a large ocean tanker. The reality was different.
No ship, a boat.
What boat was it?
It's fishing boat. I'm not fisherman. Why I'm working there? It's not my ship. The skipper told me you have the not proper papers. If I call to the police, they catch you, and you are going to jail because you are illegally come there. That's why scaring. If I go back here, I have nothing.
Vishal says, out of fear of the police and the risk of deportation, he got to work, despite having never fished a day in his life. The boat Vishal was working on was owned by a company run by this man, Thomas Nicholson, based in Annan, Dumfriesshire. Vishal is one of 9 men who have spoken to the BBC about their experiences working for Mr Nicholson's company, TN Trawlers.
Oh, it was a nightmare.
We're short of water, we're short of food.
They just want work, work, work.
He doesn't see me as a person. He doesn't care about my life.
We are slaves.
The men say they worked without proper food and rest for under minimum wage, and in Joel Quincy's case, ignored a head injury sustained on board.
When I jumped, the metal bar still hit me on my back, and then my head hit the deck. And after that, I don't remember anything.
It took 22 hours for Joel to reach the hospital. TN trawlers under Mr Nicholson's direction prioritised the catch over their workers' safety. Nicholson, seen here arriving for court, was convicted of failing to get Joel adequate care. He was fined for health and safety breaches. Joel received compensation. He's originally from the Philippines and came to the UK through a recruitment agency, a common practice. This Ghanaian agent sent at least 4 men to work for TN trawlers. He tells us in this covertly recorded conversation that he's being struck off for charging fishermen illegal fees to secure jobs.
As we speak, you're revoking my license. Many of my friends have been negotiating between schemes in Italy. Releasing. I see a human answer is too stressful.
Various agents operating worldwide sent men to work for TN companies. In total, the BBC has identified 35 men who, having worked for TN trawlers or its sister companies, went on to be identified by the Home Office as being victims of human trafficking or modern slavery. To date, there have been no convictions related to trafficking on TN boats, although there have been long-running investigations by Police Scotland and the UK Home Office. We asked Thomas Nicholson for a statement about these allegations. TN Group responded, saying it disputes any suggestion the company mistreated workers. It also refutes any allegation of modern slavery or human trafficking. To Joel, it offered an apology, saying, "We did not always get everything right, and we regret we fell short on that occasion." It also said that his company has only ever worked with reputable agents. For the specific allegation Vishal makes of being placed on the wrong boat with substandard food and no pay, there was no response. So we went to ask him directly.
Shall we come and have a chat? Just want to show you some documents, Mr Nicholson.
Well, Chris is here now. Chris, firstly, how are the men you spoke to? What's their situation?
Well, they were all recognised as victims of human trafficking by the UK Home Office, which looked at their accounts and evidence from agencies like the police. And after they were given that status, conclusive grounds, they were given discretionary leave to remain in the UK, mainly to assist the police with their investigation. In the Filipinos case, that was extended every year for about 10 years. The same happened to the likes of Vishal and some Ghanaian fishermen that are featured in the film, albeit over a shorter period of time. That leave soon expired as cases were dropped or concluded at court. Now, most of the Filipino men, not all, most, from 2012 have leave to remain, either via visa extensions or indefinite leave, so they can live and work in the UK. The Ghanaians has expired and they are in the process of reapplying to stay in the country.
And this is a very narrow focus on specific historic allegations, but how prevalent is labour exploitation in UK fishing?
Well, campaigners and academics will tell you that it's systemic, that there are certain legal loopholes that can be exploited, that foreign nationals often complain of low pay and mistreatment. The industry says otherwise. The Scottish Whitefish Association says experiences are largely positive, that foreign crewmen often earn more than their UK counterparts. It set up its own recruitment agency and a workers' welfare system to try and prevent any kind of exploitation while at sea. And the Whitefish Association pointed out, as you just did, that the allegations featured in our programme are historic, and they say that they don't reflect the wider fishing industry.
OK, Chris, thank you. BBC Scotland's investigation, Slavery at Sea, is available now on BBC iPlayer and will be on BBC One Scotland at 9 o'clock. Creative Scotland has closed a major arts fund over concerns about Scottish Government budgets. The arts body said uncertainty over millions of pounds of government support had created critical problems for its open fund for individuals. It comes less than a year after a £6.6 million budget cut was reimposed, despite being reversed earlier last year. The Scottish Government has been contacted for comment. The Scottish Hospitals Inquiry has heard the water system at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital campus did not fully meet safety standards when it opened in 2015. David Watson, a water hygiene specialist, carried out the initial risk assessment for NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. He says he made recommendations to address a series of issues that would reduce the risk of bacteria developing in some areas. Our health correspondent Lisa Summers reports.
10-year-old Millie Main was being treated in hospital for cancer when she contracted an infection. She died days later. Her death and that of other patients, as well as a series of infection outbreaks, prompted the public inquiry into Glasgow's super hospital. 4 years on, and today a new set of hearings begins.
The beginning of the Scottish Hospital Inquiry's third session.
It will consider the timeline of who knew what and when about problems with the water and ventilation systems. Evidence was heard about the risk to the water system at the time the hospital opened in 2015.
To what extent do you think that the water system, domestic water system in the hospital in 2015, complied with relevant regulations, guidance and good practice?
I think, as we stated in our risk assessment, we highlighted there were some areas where it didn't comply, and we made recommendations in our risk assessment to areas where we thought some changes should be made.
David Watson told the inquiry that some of those issues had still not been addressed 2 years later.
It wasn't until this document by DMA Canyon was leaked in 2019 that we really learned that there had been warnings about the water supply before the hospital even opened to patients. And you can see highlighted in red numerous areas where it says that work should be undertaken to prevent the build-up of potentially harmful bacteria.
The child cancer wards were closed in 2018 after a series of infection outbreaks. It was almost 3 years before they reopened.
I will tell the truth.
The whole truth?
The whole truth.
Patients like Molly Cudahy, who contracted an infection while undergoing cancer treatment, have already given evidence to the inquiry. Her dad says it continues to be a difficult time for affected families.
I think when you consider the length of time that it's taking and accepting that it's a very complex inquiry, 4 years is a hard length of time for anybody, and particularly when patients continue to be treated and they continue to endure the trauma that they had gone through in 2018. All of that is ever present within their minds.
Later, the inquiry will hear from infection control doctors as well as senior staff as the hearings continue. Lisa Summers reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
To some of the day's other stories now. And 4 Rangers fans have been banned indefinitely by the club after a woman was assaulted and allegedly robbed outside Hampden before their game against St Johnstone on Saturday. Meanwhile, Aaron Watt, who's 22, has appeared in court accused of reset in connection with the incident. He's been released on bail and ordered to keep 500 metres away from stadia where Rangers are playing. A South Lanarkshire trampoline park is pledging to cooperate with police after a 10-year-old boy died there yesterday morning. Emergency services were called to Flip Out in Rutherglen after the child became unwell. He died in hospital. Police say there don't appear to be any suspicious circumstances. The Health and Safety Executive has been informed. And the King has received an official welcome to Balmoral Castle. During a small ceremony outside the castle gates, he inspected a guard of honour from the Royal Regiment of Scotland. The pipes and drums of the Royal Corps of Signals and the band of the Royal Regiment performed at the ceremony. OK, let's get tonight's sport now with Amy. Hello.
And the League Cup was back at the weekend, Laura. That's where we are going to begin. Thanks very much. Hello there. St Johnstone have met with the Scottish FA seeking an explanation for the award of Rangers' first goal in their League Cup win at Hampden. The Perth club, they're unhappy that Cyril Desser's strike was allowed to stand, claiming the referee blew his whistle for a foul against Dessers before the strike. A goal was awarded after a VAR check, with the SFA stating the whistle blew after the ball hit the net. Rangers won the match 2-0. Elsewhere, Celtic made light work of fellow Premiership opponents Hibernian, Dyson Maeda, scored 2 in a 3-1 win that was finished off by Nicholas Kuhn after some calamitous Hibs defending that you saw there. And here is the draw then for the quarter-finals of the League Cup, with a couple of surprise names in there, as you can see. Spartans of League Two are rewarded for their defeat of Ross County with another tie against Premiership opposition. They are away to Aberdeen, while Championship side Falkirk, who beat Hearts, they visit Celtic. Motherwell take on Dundee United, and Rangers are at home to Dundee. Well, elsewhere, former Inverness Caledonian Thistle chairman Alan Savage says the club has won a watch following the directors' agreement to write off loans or turn them into equity in an effort to put the club on a better financial footing. Savage, who is back at the club in a consultancy role, says he's personally put in £200,000 in the last week, adding the actions of directors will make the club a more attractive prospect for potential buyers. The businessman says he received a call yesterday from none other than Sir Alex Ferguson offering his support and is urging fans to wipe the slate clean and support the team, manager and club as a whole.
What I want to do is we've drawn a line. The people with the historic debt, people who've loaned the club money, millions of pounds, have written it off or turned it into equity. And I just want to go forward. You know, I want to improve. I don't want to come in and just sit on it. I want to improve it. I'm putting my money where my mouth is, and they can help me if they support the manager and get really behind the club. And let's wipe the slate clean and move forward.
The manager of Partick Thistle Women says it's unacceptable that his player Courtney Stewart had to wait 3 hours for an ambulance after suffering a seizure following a head injury against Rangers. The incident happened early in yesterday's SWPL match, which Rangers went on to win 4-0. League rules do not compel clubs to have an ambulance at games, but a qualified medical practitioner must be present. Stewart was discharged from hospital after an X-ray and CT scan. The Scottish Ambulance Service has apologised for the delay.
Yeah, obviously in the 10th minute we've had a really serious head injury in the middle of the park, and she's still lying in the medical room there in the first aid room. We're still waiting in an ambulance, which I don't really think is acceptable, but I can't thank Rangers medical staff and the first aiders here. They've been brilliant with her, but I just don't think we get it at the men's game, Jane. A real serious head injury and my players in there still waiting for an ambulance. I just don't think it's acceptable.
Rugby now, and former Scotland international Fraser Brown says there's lots of new things to learn as he embarks on the role of Scotland's women's forward coach after retiring from playing earlier this year. Brown hung up his boots after a career which saw him captain both his country and his club Glasgow Warriors. Scotland's women finished 4th in this year's Six Nations after this narrow defeat to Ireland. Next month they welcome Wales and Fiji before defending their WXV2 title when the tournament takes place in South Africa from the end of September.
I spent 16 years in a male rugby environment and it is completely different. There's lots of new things to learn and for me it's really challenging, or it has been challenging to see how I develop in terms of my communication and how I'm trying to get things across, but then also the feedback that you get back off the players is completely different in the men's game, and actually it's probably more rewarding in this environment. You get probably more back off of the players than you do in the men's environment. So yeah, I didn't have that much time, but I've loved being in so far. So.
And just a quick mention, the SWPL highlights, if you're interested in watching those, start on BBC Scotland tonight at 7.
Good stuff. Thank you very much, Amy. Now, looking ahead to tonight's 9, Laura McKeever has spoken to a scientist from Edinburgh's Botanic Gardens whose breakthrough study has worked out how to remove prickly thorns from plants.
Nothing happens to the flavour of the fruit. So it's really good news. This gene doesn't have any negative consequences in terms when we remove it. So it seems awfully simple, surprisingly simple story.
And you can catch that full interview on the 9 on the BBC Scotland channel later. Now, it's become an annual event and depending on what you find funny, it will raise a laugh or a groan. Yes, this year's funniest joke of the Edinburgh Fringe, voted for by members of the public, has been revealed. It is by the comedian Mark Simmons, and here he is telling it.
I was going to sail around the globe in the world's smallest ship, but I bottled it. Some jokes, it's all about like taking people down one way and then doing a twist, and then the twist is surprising, makes people laugh. But I think the best jokes when it creates like an image in your head. I think they're the best jokes, so you can really visualise what's happening.
Yeah, that one. It is a thinker. Isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, I've got a joke for you actually, and
Oh,
that's
no.
this week's weather.
Oh dear, oh dear.
Yeah.
But hang on, I keep hearing about a hurricane. What's happening?
The remnants of a hurricane, just adding to this week's weather, which is very wet indeed. Let me explain all. Laura. Thank you very much. Very good evening to you. It's been a really miserable Monday across many parts of the country, hasn't it? Heavy and persistent rain, and that is the theme for the week ahead. Areas of low pressure moving in off the Atlantic, bringing heavy rain and high winds, and as Laura mentioned, this little feature here, the remnants of what was Hurricane Ernesto, just adding to the mix and adding to the rainfall. Over the next few hours, we've got heavy rain continuing, working its way north and eastwards across the country, accompanied by some pretty brisk winds. By the end of the night, most of the wet weather still with us across the western, northwest and northern Isles, but drier elsewhere. Temperatures holding around 11 to 13 Celsius. To tomorrow, and it's a bright start for many. The overnight rain still with us in Shetland, and then as we head through towards late morning and into the afternoon, showers get going. They'll be numerous, they'll be heavy, and most persistent in the west, merging at times to give a longer spell of rain, so really just wet here. Further east, there'll be some brightness in between the showers, but coming in on those brisk winds, it won't be long before the next shower arrives with you. Around the west and northwest coast, the wind's brisk here, and quite a cool feel tomorrow. If you catch some of those heavy showers, perhaps some rumbles of thunder in the mix as well. And then in towards tomorrow evening, some further wet weather pushing its way further south and east across the country. That takes us to midweek. And once again, you can see low pressure and heavy rain. There's the remnants of what was Hurricane Ernesto. Not a hurricane by the time it reaches our shores, or indeed a tropical storm, but just adding to the amount of rain that's falling out of the sky. And because of that, a Met Office yellow warning. We've already seen a month's worth of rain in some parts of the country. Throughout the course of this week, a second month's worth of rain is likely. Initially on Wednesday, it's dry with some early brightness, then the cloud builds and the rain arrives. And certainly it's western parts of the country that will bear the brunt. Heavy and persistent poor conditions on the roads, the chance of some localised flooding, and a windy day with it near gale force gusts around the west coast. So a very wet week of weather ahead. That's the forecast.
Dear, oh dear. Thank you very much, Christopher. Now tonight's main news again. A teenager has been jailed after 3 of his friends died in a car crash near Dumfries. 17-year-old Jake Loy was driving without a full licence. He was sentenced to more than 4.5 years. And that is Reporting Scotland. I will have your late news around 10:30 tonight. Join me then if you can. In the meantime, from all of us here, enjoy your evening. Good night.